Hello friends, welcome. Friends, on April 9th, 2024, that is just before the elections, I had anticipated tariff hikes and therefore I did this article, which is the title of this article in front of you is Analyzing Tariff Sustainability in the Indian Telecom Sector, a deep dive into rural and urban consumer expenditure. Now, why this note is important and what this note is all about. You can go through this note and I'm going to paste the link in the description of this video. The idea about this note is to estimate the paying capacity of the consumers, because tariff hike cannot be done in vacuum. It has to be done in alignment with the paying capacity of the Indian consumer. Now, it is very difficult to estimate the paying capacity of the Indian consumer because unless you have hard data before you. Fortunately, there is a report which recently came out which is talking about household consumption expenditure. So this report is pretty important report and it came out just recently. And it kind of provides a snapshot of how the consumers spend in various segments or the categories of consumption item in both rural and urban areas. Now, using this value, I'm going to just show you a sample table which kind of captures these values, and I'm just in front of you. Yeah, look at this. So what it is saying is that if you see this absolute percentage breakup, let me just take my pen. Absolute percentage breakup of spending in various capacity in various item groups all India in these segments. So you see here we have got cereal substitute, we have got pulses and product, we have got salt, milk, vegetable, fruits, egg and meat, edible oil, spices, beverages and various other items. And there is one important item which is called consumer services excluding conveyance. So this is an important item. So what I thought is that in this category of item, the spend on mobile service expenditure is going to fall. So using this table, what I did is I wrote this article. Using this report, I wrote this article and I estimated using this article. This is a very complex article because it goes into various numbers. This is not the purpose of this video to explain this article, but I'm just going to I'm taking the reference of this article is because this is very important. So let's go straight to the conclusion. Now, what is the conclusion? The conclusion is that if you look at the segments, the various segments of households in India, which is the 0 to 5%, 5 to 10%. So these are the segments of household in rural as well as urban areas. So what I did was I was able to extrapolate for Bharti, Jio and Vodafone Idea in both these segments, all the both these categories, urban and rural, all these segments. Within the segments, what would be the spending pattern of the household? For example, in 0 to 5% in Bharti, the maximum spending on communication services will be rupees 80. For Jio, it will be 89. For VI, it will be 85. Similarly, in urban area, it will be 136. And then in Jio, it is 135. VI, it is 139. Like that, in various segments, there is a paying capacity beyond which a consumer won't pay. Yeah, there will be, of course, the inflation is going to have an impact and there will be the paying capacity may increase as time progresses, but it is not going to change drastically. Now, if you take a weighted average for all these segments, for Bharti on a pan-India basis, it is 214. And for Jio, it is 211. And VI, it is 227 in the rural segment, rural category. And then in urban category, it is 426. For Bharti, 421 for Jio and 434 for VI. And then if you look at the highest segment, you'll find that the highest segment has got very large paying capacity. And these are all average. These are not individual persons that we are talking about. These are average because there could be many people who may pay thousands of rupees, maybe lakhs of rupees on consumer services. We are not talking about them. We are taking an average here because this report talks about that. So what I thought is, because of this tariff hike, which is kind of in progress and everybody has announced tariff hike, And there is a perception, there is a what you call a need by the industry, because people are talking about that, we have increased the tariff by 20%, the next we have already crossed the 200 rupees barrier of ARPU, then we'll cross 250, then we'll cross 300. So I thought it will be a good idea to evaluate based on this restriction, which is basically the spending capacity of the consumers in various segments across categories of rural and urban, what kind of leverage an operator has to increase tariff, because that will be a very interesting exercise. I don't know how many people have done it, maybe the operators have done it, but I thought let me just do a video to explain this fact, because it is not going to be a exercise which will be done in vacuum. It has to be based on these constraints, the market constraints. So what I did was, I had basically created this report or this article based on Excel calculations. So I'm not going to go through the various calculations, you can understand those calculations. I'm just going to the last two steps, which is step number 6 and step number 7, which is nothing but this table, which I showed you right now. This is a table, right, in my article. Now what I've done is that in this report which I showed you by the NSSO, what they have done is they have said that the distribution of household between rural and urban is in the percentage of 68.5 and 31.5%, which means that the urban populations are 31.5% and the rural is 65.5%. So what I can do, I can basically do a blended number, which is nothing but, what is that? It is basically a weighted average of all these numbers. You can add this, and then I come out with this step 8, and this is the table which I come out with, right? And which is a very simple thing to do. You know that, how to do it. You multiply this by this, and then you multiply this by this and add it, right? So this multiplied by this multiplied by this, and then add these two results, and you'll get this number, right? So that's how I've done the calculation. So if you look at this particular table, you will find that if I do a weighted average for Bharti across pan-India in all the segments, because 5% multiplied by this, 5% multiplied by this, 10% multiplied by this, and then you get this number, 213.8. Similarly, RGO, it comes out to be 211, right? Why it is different for different service provider? You have to read the report, then only you understand. But it is like that. But that is neither here nor there, because I'm not going to use that difference here. I'm just telling you that this is how I have calculated. This is not based on some conjecture. This is based on hard data. Okay. So these are the numbers right in front of you. So we know, one thing we know is that, sorry, this is not the number. Sorry, actually, my mistake. This is not the number. The number is, average number is here. Sorry. Let me just restate my statement. The average pan-India number for Bharti, RGO and VI is this. This is the number, right? Because this is basically painted yellow in front of that. Now, what is this number? Now, this number is the weighted average for the 90% of the household, pan-India. So the weighted average for 90% of the household, right? Because the 10%, the 5% of the household has got the paying capacity up to 800 rupees. Then we have got 5% of the household has paying capacity up to 500 rupees. And 90% of the population have a paying capacity up to around 213, 211, 222 rupees. So what I've done is using Monte Carlo simulation. Now you don't have to go and understand what Monte Carlo simulation is all about. I'm going to explain to you what it is all about. You don't have to worry, and you don't have to get into complex coding also. It's very simple. What I've done is I've created a data set which is a category of high, medium and low. So just look at this number, high, medium and low. This data set, and I'm going to explain to you what this code does. Oh my god, this is high, this is medium and this is low. Weights, as I already told you, the high is 5%. Have you seen here? Right? I just told you that this is the 5% category of 800 rupees ARPU, and then 5% of 500 rupees ARPU. So what I've done is, in this code, I have given 5%, 90%. Total all these things are going to add up to 100%, right? Which is the weights. And the ARPU, as I told you, that the top category, let me just make a change here. I'm sorry, here I was doing some changes in the code, therefore I'm fine with that. Okay, no, that is absolutely fine. I shall getting confused. So this is the ARPU, today's ARPU assume that this is the today's ARPU, that is 500 rupees on the high category, right? The 500 rupees on the high category, the medium category is 250 rupees, and the low category is 200 rupees, and the ARPU cap which emanates from this particular table, which I showed you right now, 800 rupees for the 8%, 5% cap percentile, 500 rupees for the next 5% percentile, and 90 and 200 around 225 rupees for the 90% percentile. So this is mentioned here. If you see, I have kept it 250 rupees. Actually, I should make it change to 225 rupees. Let me just make a change to 225 rupees here. 225. Okay. So we have an ARPU of 500, 250, and 200. And how this works? 500, 250, and 200. So if you look at this Excel calculation right in front of you, which I have done, I have it in front of you. You'll see the calculation: 5%, 5%, 90%, 500, 250, and 200 adds up to 217.5. This is the Bharti's latest quarter ARPU. So I've taken Bharti's number. I don't want to basically get into the other people number, but just taken Bharti's number as a reference point to start with, right? Now let's get back to the code. So now you understand the data set. Once you understand the data set, what I'm doing is I am basically running some simulation. Simulation is nothing but based on these numbers, right? And based on the ARPU cap of 800, because 800 rupees ARPU is which I have already explained. It emanates from that table which I showed you just now. 800 rupees for the 5% segment of the population. 800 rupees, and then we have got 500 rupees and 225 rupees. With the 90% of the segment, I created data frame. It's very simple to do, nothing, no difficulty. Then I have the number of simulation which I am running at 1000 for Monte Carlo simulation, and the number of segments is these segments, which is length of this data frame. Right? Okay. Now what I've done is I have created a NP arrange, which is a list of incremental tariff hikes, which is starting from 5% and increment of 5% to 100%. So because for every tariff hike, because when you are doing tariff hike, you're doing 5%, 10%, 20%, 30%. So you have to evaluate the impact for each and every step of tariff hike, right? So this is the ARPU change of tariff hike, which I have created for step of 5%, 5 to 100%. Then there is a standard definition, which is basically nothing but a mathematical term to basically measure accuracy. When you do the calculation, you have to put a standard deviation number. Now the base ARPU is what? This data frame that you have in front of you, right? Which is values, which is nothing but these are the ARPU, right? Base ARPU, if you do the calculation, these are the 500, 250, and 200. Then the initial weights is initial ARPU is nothing but the sum product of this 500 multiplied by 0.5, 250 multiplied by 0.5, 200 multiplied by 0.9. So when you calculate, I showed you that it comes out to be at 217.5 rupees or Bharti. So you look at this number, this is the number 217.5, right? So this is what is the number. So here we have the initial weighted ARPU. Then what I do is that I am initializing the list in which the results are going to get stored. So this is nothing but an initialization. Again, nobody has to be a coding expert to understand that. Why I am explaining this code is that people should not basically say that this is in the air, right? Nothing is in the air. Everything is done through mathematical logic, right? Now what I'm doing is I'm performing the Monte Carlo simulation, and I'm doing what? I'm basically using this ARPU change, percentage change, and then running simulation and capturing the data in one of the list and doing an aggregation. And then finally, this is the value of that value that is coming out. The total ARPU results we're getting appended in this list, right? This is the list which I'm going to print. Total weighted ARPU results, append total ARPU. So you can pause the video and you can look at it. Anybody is interested into that, they can do it, but you don't have to understand this. There is no point, right? But for those experts who really want to see each and everything, the data code is in right front of you. Then there is a plotting here, nothing less. So what I can do is, and tell you why this is very important discussion. Let me run this code in front of you with this base data, right? Which is 500, 250, and 200, the initial ARPU, which comes out to be 217, and the ARPU cap based on that NSSO data, 800, 500, 225, because each category will have an ARPU cap. You can't just go and increase our, tariffs indefinitely, right, disproportionately. So when I run this, you will find that there will be a plot in front of you. And this plot is going to be very, very interesting, by the way. Let it show up, because there is 1,000 simulation, and again I'm running this, doing a parallel recording. It will take a little bit of time. Both the things are running in parallel, but it will show up very, very soon. Don't worry. What I can do is that I can just put a pause in the video. Pause. Yeah, so I'm back here. So look at this data. Now this data is going to give you a very interesting, insight. What is this telling us? That the base ARPU, which if you recall is 217.5, the weighted average, which is basically starting with 500, roughly around those numbers which you saw, right? Now, as you increase the numbers, right? As you increase the numbers, the weighted average number will also increase. But it is going to hit a roadblock based on this particular value right in front of you, which is 800, 500 and 225. So you will see that this 225 number is basically going to come very, very soon, right? It is going to reach here. Yeah, this is a 225 number, you see. So till 225, for the 90% of the population, you can raise tariff. Right, on an average. You can do it higher for every segment. For an average, 225 is the limit beyond which you cannot increase. So that is the cap which you are going to hit. But the next category segment, which is a medium segment, the cap is what? Cap is, what was the cap? Cap was of 500 rupees, right? 500 rupees. So it is, you can still keep on increasing, you see? You can still keep on increasing. Let me just take my face out of here, right? It will be difficult otherwise to see the car. So you can keep increasing, right? So it is still room you have. But for the higher segment, the cap will hit at 800 rupees. Now let's look at this number. You will already see that the weighted average, which is the blue the dark blue, it has reached a inflection point, right? 250 rupees roughly around. It is not going to increase significantly. It may increase a little bit here and there because this number is increasing, right? So it will go up to 266 rupees. So what you have to do is that since you can't increase on the lower segment, it is going to be capped at certain level. You have to keep increasing the tariffs on the mid and the higher segment. In the higher segment also you will hit a roadblock of 800. On the mid segment, which is the 5% which is below the higher segment, you have got certain room to increase. But maximum you can go up to, even if you can increase up to 100% tariff hike, because this is going to hit a cap, you are going to have a ARPU, total weighted average ARPU of 266 rupees. Not more than that, right? So 300 is still not going to. So imagine you have to increase your tariff by 100% to able to get a hit a weighted average ARPU of 266 rupees. So 20% is not sufficient. 40% more will not sufficient. In order to reach a 300 rupees, you have to basically do a lot of work. Now, if I change this number, let's say let me just do one more thing. Or instead of 500 rupees, let me just make it 450 rupees. 450 rupees, and then run this number, the mid segment, and see what happens. Because mid segment there is possibility of tariff increase, which was not hitting the threshold. So let's wait and see. I'm going to pause the video. Yeah, I'm back. So here you see that the inflection point has reached around 450 rupees, and you have got a threshold ARPU increase of 264 rupees. Here the high segment already has reached threshold. So what I'm trying to say is that the goal of increasing ARPU to 300 rupees cannot be achieved by increasing your tariffs at the high end. You have to ensure that the threshold limit at the lowest level, which is the paying capacity of the 90% of the consumer, is taken care of, and they are willing to pay for higher ARPU, right, when you increase the ARPU. So let's do another round of simulation and increase this to let me just make this to 250 rupees and then run this again. Okay, yeah, so now you see that once you have increased to 250 rupees, you are kind of going closer to 300 rupees. Still you are not reached, you're 285 rupees. Now assume that you don't have the capacity to increase these high category numbers to 800 and 500 rupees, which I'm talking about. If I reduce these numbers, because these numbers are pretty high numbers by the way, and there could be possible that that category which I mentioned, fully may not be consumed through because of mobile services. So let me do one more simulation, and if I say that okay, let's make this 700, right, and let's make this 400 and keep this 250, right? Let's assume that is 250, though that is very high, and run this simulation again. So what do we see now? The weighted average number, right, it is going high, and then it has reached 271, right, because of the 250 rupees threshold. Now it is still it is still hitting 270 rupees, not close to 300, right? And if I reduce this, the lowest segment, to again make it 225 or 230, let's make it 230, and I am just going to run this, and let me pause this video. Yeah, so what do we see? So if you see the weighted average number, it is increasing. Now it is at 250 rupees, right? Why it is at 250 rupees? Because the low segment I have got reduced to 230 rupees now. So it is still hitting 260, 261, it is still not 300. So now you understand that the operators do not have the full leverage of increasing tariffs. The leverage is actually, the problem is that the market is the leverage. If the market does not have the paying capacity for higher tariffs, you are going to hit a roadblock. You do not have ultimate leverage. And the 90% of the population, which are actually at the category of 200 to 230 rupees and has got a very small segment to spend on mobile services, they determine the leverage. If this number goes high, then this number is going to increase. That this number, which you see the blue line, this is going to increase significantly. So you are dependent on the 90% of the population to support tariff hikes and increasing the overall weighted average ARPU. You are not dependent on the 10% of the population, because you have to steeply increase the tariffs for the top end in order to move this needle a little bit high. But if this segment, with the 90% of the segment, if you can have the ability to move it higher, then imagine the kind of tariff hike that you will be able to do. So when we compare that India is a very low tariff country, India doesn't have India probably the data is the cheapest, people tend to forget that India, 90% of the population doesn't have the paying capacity for those tariffs. So the mobile operators do not have the leverage. So it is that see, if India has the lowest ARPU, is because of the character of the market. It has got nothing to do with when you start comparing with Western countries, that Western countries are paying $50 for 2 GB data and we are paying $2. You have to look into and make an apples to apples comparison. So I encourage everybody to do these kind of analysis, because if you are not going to, you are just going to talk in the air, right? And don't ground yourself with data. Then you will basically go all wrong. All your predictions are going to go wrong. So in my view, these are higher numbers. When we talk about these numbers of 800 rupees or 700 rupees or 400 rupees, I believe that these are very high numbers, because the segment is the full segment and the consumer part is a small part of the segment. Let me just go to that table again. If you look at this table, right, the fact sheet, this segment that we are talking about, the consumer services excluding conveyance, right? Consumer service excluding conveyance. There could be other consumer services which we don't know. Maybe hair cutting or some other services. So this number is not exclusively for consumer services. So I have taken a number which is quite high number. This number may not be that high. So given the situation, the leverage on increasing tariff in India disproportionately is not there. People may say whatever you want, and that is why it is important for the government to understand this and reduce the input cost on spectrum. Because if you reduce the input cost on spectrum, then you will be able to deal with this disparity between, or kind of lack of synergy between, the paying capacity and the cost of deployment of network. See, people have to understand this. Unless you understand this particular fact that Indian consumer doesn't have the paying capacity for services that you are going to basically sell in the country. You can't sell services at whatever cost that you want to, price that you intend to do. You can't do that because you are constrained by this particular table. So that's why the input cost has to go down, spectrum cost has to go down. Unless they do that, the Indian consumers' aspirations are not going to be met. So friends, I thought of doing this video because I felt this is important. All the discussions that happen on conjecture, they are not grounded by data. So let's look at data and let's figure out that how much threshold that we have to pull maximum output from the consumer given the constraint in which our general economic framework is set up. Okay, thank you friends for your time. I'll come back to you with a new video next time. I hope that you have liked this video.